Okay, here we go. This is going to be a quick video about compression when I switch over to the workstation screen, and I will narrate that a little bit. I was listening to a little bit of EA's Keys live stream this morning, and there was a big discussion on compression and what it is, what it does, and I thought maybe I can help out a little bit for whoever's a little lost in the weeds or whatever. It's not that complicated. Compression is all about gain reduction. And if you picture it as someone once explained to me, as if someone was manually riding the fader, and every time something was a little loud, you'd pull the fader down a little bit, and every time something was a little not loud enough, you'd kind of jump it up. This is something to control that. And depending on how you set the ratio, the higher you go with the ratio, the stronger it'll be. And the faster you set the attack, the faster the fader would be tugged or pushed back up. And then the release is also the same thing. Like, the attack is how fast you would pull it down, and the release would be how fast it would come back up to where it was. And you could have it go slowly with a slow release or quick. So if you picture this, with a slow attack, the fader will react, the gain reduction will react slower to the incoming signal. And with a faster attack, it will react faster to the incoming signal. So it'll jump really quick on that transient, or whatever it is hitting, vocal, kick drum, snare drum, clap, whatever, guitar. And then on the release tip, it's the same thing. It's how fast it lets go, or how long it holds on for. I'll show you on the screen a couple of different ways of demoing it. Back in the day, we used to run a signal generator with a tone, typically 1K or 1,000 hertz. And you would run it into the compressor and then bring up your peak reduction until you saw that, like, okay, when it's seeing this level of input and I turn the peak or gain reduction up, you can actually adjust it to how many dB of gain reduction you want, depending on what the incoming signal is. You'll be able to see it clearer when I do it on the screen. I just wanted to get started on video first with the, rather than just being a faceless video. I will talk a little bit more about the Dilla stuff, because I saw another video this morning, somewhat of a live stream, a guy I don't know but I've heard of, and it's funny because they were ripping up Rick Beato for being a boomer and for commenting on rap and wondering what's going to be the next thing and usual blah blah blah, and they were killing him for being a boomer and saying that he's out of touch or whatever. But I do think that if you are, I don't know what the next level or what next moniker is going to be for, you don't want to be caught up in the nobody makes beats like Dilla anymore at the age of 35, and you're saying, like, nobody's making beats like Dilla, nobody's making beats like Premier. Yeah, no, they aren't. But how is that any different than ripping the boomers for saying that rock no one's outdoing rock or outdoing the Beatles or any of that kind of thing. So you got to be, I would hope that you'd be careful to not be caught up being the next boomer, the guy who's still talking about Dilla 18 years since his passing, and lamenting that they don't make beats like that anymore, and guys are still chasing his sound and his flow. I hope you understand what I'm saying. The guys that are talking about a lot about this aren't really in the game. They're they're just Rick Beatos of a different generation, just talking the same stuff. So now we're going to get into the compressor world. I will leave my audio on, and we'll be switching video. All right, so I dialed up a beat in MPC Beats. Dialed up a beat is an exaggeration. All I did was put a kick snare situation just so you can get an idea of what compression is going to do to that. But before we get into that, and we'll mute that. This is the signal generator thing that I'm talking about. Let's just hide this so we don't have too much clutter on the screen. Bear with me on this. Boom. Boom. Okay, so here's a tone generator, and this is generating 1K. I have it set at minus 10 dB. You can see that over here, it's coming in at minus 10. I have it muted so that you don't have to hear the tone. We can clearly see it. It's coming in, it's generating at minus 10. It's sitting at minus 10. The first compressor I want to show you, because it's going to give you a pretty clear indication of how these things work in relation to each other. You can ignore the sidechain stuff. There's nothing happening there. It's not in. The knee I have off. That's not something you need to worry about if you are in especially early on. So let's just set the ratio at 4.0, which is it's kind of a common setting that people would use. So I want to try and show you that. I've got the attack at around 12 o'clock and the release at around 12 o'clock. That's relative to this compressor. So right now it's in bypass. I'll unbypass it. As you can see, the tone that's coming in has not changed at all because everything's in bypass. I mean, everything is at 0. If I was to crank gain, I could bring it up. See that over there? Watch that over there. If I was to crank gain, I could add. So I'm going from minus 10 right here. If I added 6 dB, it would go up 6 dB, which would be right around 4 on that thing. Okay, yeah, it's around 4. It should be exactly at 4. So let's go back down to 0. It's at minus 10. If I wanted to compress the signal that was coming into this from a minus 10 signal, if I wanted to compress it 3 dB, I would bring up the threshold until I went down to about minus 13. And that would be, somewhere around there. We're going from there. We're just closing down the compressor enough. I could bring it down 6 dB. It's easier to see. Boom. So that's how we would know that a minus 10 signal was going to hit this and compress the signal by 6 dB. Is that a lot? Kind of. But here's now how the release can affect that. The release will increase it or decrease it depending on depending on what you want to do. A faster attack will barely increase it. A slower attack, this is slower, will give you less compression. So if you were back at this 12 o'clock range thing here, most of these kind of plugins have an option 0 thing, or an option click thing where you can, for what they have designed, that zeroes it out. Now, if you cranked up this ratio, you'll get more gain reduction. So it's all relative to that. Let's go back down. I wanted to show you there was a little bit of discussion in the chat that I saw talking about what is limiting. I mean, here's a good demonstration. You can use hard limiting from one of their presets. Boom. So what happens? The ratio goes to 100 to 1 because limiting as opposed to compression is a high ratio. Typically, you would set it at a slower attack and a fast release. This way you didn't get breathing and pumping, but it's to taste. And then you can, now the reason why they have a gain on these compressors is you can make up the gain that you lose when you're compressing. So let's go back to like a regular compression setting. Let's go to, I don't know, 3.9 to 1. So let's say we're going to go for, I don't know, 3 dB of gain reduction, right? So we're down to about minus 13 from minus 10. But that's going to be the gain reduction setting. But if I wanted to bring back that gain after it's compressed, and now it'll be a more level signal, a more even signal, that's how you would bring back to 0 or to minus 10 where you were at. So this is with the tone. We used to do this all the time in the studio because it was a way to check a compressor and get it set so that it was recallable, which is like a whole nother can of worms that I can't get into with you right now. But anyway, let's bypass this one. I'll show you the same effect with, this is on this same channel. This is set at 3 dB, 3 to 1. This is set at 0. When I unbypass this thing, you'll see that nothing has moved, right? This is at minus 10. This is at 0. 3 to 1 compression. But now this threshold here, which is input dependent, if I start to bring that in, you could see that I'm affecting the gain, which is going to be the amount of compression that this generates. And you can see it show up on the gain change. You can look at it here. That's minus 10. And then you could affect it this way. It would be like getting down to minus 10. It's all related to itself. A compressor like this has an automatic attack and release, and the attack is input dependent. So you have to kind of mess with that. I'll show you how that works on another channel. So let's get away from this tone generator thing, and we'll look at the MPC beat, which is this. Okay, so right now on that beat, which is just kick and snare, it's kind of like a heavy house kick and house clap. Right now I have an SSL channel on it. So the SSL channel, the dynamics are in this area right here. Right now everything's set at 0. So there's nothing happening there. So I could bring this up to 3 dB. I could leave this release super low, super fast, and I'll just mess with the threshold on this kick. Now you could see in a couple of places where your gain reduction reading is. One is right here. We're getting way up there. We're into like 6 dB of gain reduction. And you can see here, it also shows you that you're getting about 6 dB of gain reduction. You would get a different sound and feel by slowing down the release. Here it kind of drags the kick drum. If you were to switch to a fast attack, it'll really crush things. So now it's demolished this beat. As you could see, it would be like That's bypass. That's in. Typically, you wouldn't do a fast attack and on a kick snare. You'd want a relatively fast release, probably somewhere in the, I don't know, 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction for a little bit of feel. And you could lower the ratio to fine tune that. So you can see how I'm coming down to nothing showing. I could get into like just 3 dB, just blinking along. If I had it up at 8 dB, it'll just squeeze it faster and harder, but sort of look the same. These things are like, you know, you got to go by ear. That's that. I'll show you real quickly with the DBX 160 that we were looking at before. So now the SSL channels in bypass. Let's go back to this. Threshold off. See, it's doing nothing. In bypass, basically not really doing anything. 3 to 1 ratio. Start bringing it in. We gotta unbypass it. So now this compressor gives you a little hint as to when compression is kicking in. It's kind of fun. Not for everybody, but if you're into big game hunting, you want to use a 160 once in a while. 160 is kind of a quick compressor on the attack and the release, but you know, you can get some big squeeze out of it if you want to. Like, see how it's like evening everything out, and then I could bring back some of that gain with the output. So it gets real chunky and chewy if you compress the bejesus out of it. 6 to 1, heavy threshold, and bringing back some of the gain with the output. I think that'll get you started, or get you more confused, and that's where I'll leave it for now.